The year was 1952, and winter had descended on Harlem with a vengeance that rattled the window panes of the tenements and froze the breath of the faithful on Sunday mornings. The wind whipped off the Hudson River, cutting through the thickest wool coats and turning the breath of the pedestrians on 125th Street into plumes of gray steam, ghosting against the brickwork of the city. But inside the penthouse apartment in Sugar Hill, high up off Edgecombe Avenue, where the lights of the neighborhood glittered like scattered coins, the world was different. Here, the air was warm, scented with the rich, earthy aroma of beeswax polish, the lingering smoke of expensive cigars, and the soft, powdery fragrance of a new life that had recently taken up residence in the heart of a gangster. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stood by the window of his study, looking out at the city he ruled, his silhouette framed by the gray light of the afternoon. He was 47 years old, a man whose name was whispered with fear in the pool halls where debts were settled in blood, and with respect in the churches where turkeys were handed out at Thanksgiving. He was a survivor of the highest order, a man who had survived gang wars with the likes of Dutch Schultz and withstood the relentless, crushing pressure of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. The streets knew him as a man made of granite and iron, unyielding and unbreakable. But as he turned away from the window and looked at the silver-framed photograph on his desk, the granite softened, revealing the flesh and blood beneath. The photo was of his daughter, Elise. She was 8 months old, a tiny, perfect thing with eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. For Bumpy, Elise wasn't just a child. She was a redemption song, a melody that drowned out the cacophony of his past. She was the proof that something pure could come from a life as complicated and violent as his. When he held her, the noise of the rackets, the wail of police sirens, and the constant grinding plodding of the underworld faded into a hushed silence. He wanted the world for her. He wanted to build a fortress of gold and silk around her so that she would never know the coldness of the streets he walked, never feel the bite of the winter wind that howled outside. That desire for the best, for a life untouched by the grime of his trade, was why he had hired Miss Adelaide. Bumpy walked out of his study and down the long hallway, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian runners that lined the floor. He adjusted his tie, catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror, a man composed, ready for war or diplomacy. He was about to leave for a meeting at the Flash Inn, but he wanted to say goodnight to his princess first. The nursery door was closed. Bumpy paused, his hand hovering over the brass handle. He reached for it, intending to slip in quietly, but then he heard it. A sound that had become all too common in the last 3 weeks, tearing at the fabric of his peace, crying. It wasn't the soft, fussy whimpering of a tired baby settling down for a nap. It was a high-pitched, frantic shriek, a sound that pricked the skin and set the nerves on edge. It was the sound of a small creature in distress, primal and terrified. Bumpy frowned, the unease coiling in his gut like a snake. He opened the door. The room was dimly lit by a street lamp outside the window, casting long, fractured shadows across the floor. Miss Adelaide was standing by the crib, her back to the door, a rigid silhouette against the crib rails. She was a tall woman, severe in her posture, wearing a starch-white uniform that looked like it belonged in a hospital ward rather than a home, crisp and clinically detached. Her hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to pull her eyes open, giving her a perpetual look of intense scrutiny. She had come highly recommended by a contact in the mayor's office, a professional governess who had raised the children of bankers and senators, a woman of pedigree. Hiring a white nanny in 1950s Harlem was a statement, a flag planted in the soil of high society. It was Bumpy saying, "My child deserves what the Rockefellers have." It was a shield of legitimacy against a world that saw him only as a criminal. "Miss Adelaide?" Bumpy said softly, stepping into the room. The woman jumped, spinning around with a start, her body blocking the crib as if hiding something. For a split second, Bumpy saw a flash of something in her eyes. Annoyance? Fear? It was gone too quickly to track, replaced instantly by a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Johnson," she whispered, putting a finger to her lips in a gesture of exaggerated hush. "Please, I just got her settled. She is in a rare state tonight." Bumpy stepped further into the room. The crying had stopped the moment he spoke, replaced by a jagged, hitching breath coming from the crib. The sound of a sob caught in a tiny throat. "She sounds terrified," Bumpy said, his voice low, moving past the nanny to look down at his daughter. Elise was lying on her back, her tiny hands clutching the blanket so hard her knuckles were white. Her face was red and blotchy, stained with the exertion of her screams. When Bumpy leaned over the rail, her eyes widened. She didn't smile. She didn't reach for him. She flinched. It was a small movement, a tiny recoil into the mattress, as if she expected a blow. But Bumpy saw it. It hit him in the chest like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. "Hey there, princess," Bumpy whispered, reaching down to stroke her cheek, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. "It's just Daddy. It's just Papa." Elise stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between him and the woman standing behind him. She looked exhausted, a soldier weary from battle. "She has colic, Mr. Johnson," Adelaide said, her voice crisp and authoritative, stepping up beside him. "I've told Mrs. Johnson this repeatedly. The child has a sensitive constitution. She works herself into these frenzies over nothing. Digestion, likely." Bumpy kept his hand on Elise's cheek. Her skin felt cool, clammy. But then his fingers brushed her hairline just above her ear. It was wet. Bumpy frowned, his instincts sharpening. He touched the collar of her sleeper. It was damp, soaking through to the skin. "Why is she wet?" Bumpy asked, not looking up, his gaze fixed on the damp fabric. "Sweat," Adelaide said quickly, the answer ready on her tongue. "Like I said, she works herself into a frenzy. She screams until she perspires. It's quite common with high-strung children." Bumpy rubbed the moisture between his thumb and forefinger. He brought it to his nose. It didn't smell like sweat. It didn't smell like milk. It smelled like tap water. Maybe a hint of chlorine. "Change her," Bumpy said, straightening up and turning to the woman. "I don't want her sleeping in damp clothes." "I was just about to," Adelaide said, stepping forward, effectively ushering him away from the crib with her body. "But it would be best if you left, sir. Your presence, it stimulates her. She needs a calm, neutral environment to learn self-soothing. If you coddle her every time she cries, she will never develop discipline." Bumpy looked at the woman. He looked at the severe line of her mouth, the lack of warmth in her eyes. He looked at her hands, large, strong hands with short, unpolished nails. "She's a baby, Adelaide," Bumpy said, his voice dropping an octave, a rumble of thunder in the quiet room. "She doesn't need discipline. She needs comfort." "Discipline is comfort, Mr. Johnson," Adelaide replied coolly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Structure is safety. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a schedule to keep." Bumpy stared at her for a long moment. In the street, if someone spoke to him with that tone, they would be bleeding before the sentence was finished. But this was his home, This was the woman entrusted with his heart, and she was the expert, the professional approved by the mayor's office. Mamie trusted her. The agency trusted her. "Good night, Elise," Bumpy whispered, his eyes lingering on the crib. He turned and walked out of the room. As the door clicked shut behind him, he felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach, a cold stone settling in his gut. Colic, he thought. Sweat. It didn't sit right. Bumpy Johnson was a man who made his living by reading people, by seeing the tell in a gambler's eye or the hesitation in a betrayer's voice. He knew when a man was lying about a gambling debt. He knew when a snitch was holding back information. And Miss Adelaide? She was holding something back. The next 3 days were a slow-motion nightmare for Bumpy. He found himself finding excuses to come home early, leaving meetings halfway through, driven by a nagging pull in his chest. He found himself standing outside the nursery door, listening, a ghost in his own hallway. The pattern was always the same. In the mornings, when Mamie was around, Adelaide was the picture of perfection. She sang nursery rhymes in a clear, lilting voice. She took Elise for walks in the pram, parading her through the neighborhood like a queen, nodding to the neighbors. She folded the laundry with military precision, every crease sharp. But in the late afternoons, when the sun went down and the shadows stretched across the apartment, the atmosphere changed. Elise would start to cry. It would begin around 4 p.m. A low, anxious whimpering that escalated into full-blown panic, a crescendo of fear. Bumpy sat in the living room with Mamie on a Tuesday evening. They were listening to the radio, a jazz tune playing softly, but Bumpy wasn't hearing the music. He was hearing the muffled shrieks from the back of the apartment, each one a needle in his skin. "Mamie," Bumpy said, putting down his newspaper, the headlines blurring before his eyes. "That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like a stomach ache." Mamie looked up from her knitting. She looked tired, dark circles smudging the skin beneath her eyes. "Adelaide says it's the witching hour. She says some babies just have a hard time transitioning to night. She says we have to let her handle it, or Elise won't bond with her." "I don't care about her bonding with the maid," Bumpy snapped, the frustration boiling over. "I care that my daughter sounds like she's in pain." "I took her to Dr. Williams yesterday," Mamie said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Bumpy froze. "You did? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to worry you unless there was something wrong," Mamie said, putting her knitting down. "I had him check her from head to toe, Ellsworth. No fever, no rashes, no bruises. Her stomach is soft. He said she's perfectly healthy. He agreed with Adelaide. He said it's likely just temperament." "Temperament," Bumpy repeated, the word tasting like ash. She was smiling 2 months ago. She was laughing. Now she looks at me like I'm a stranger. She flinches, Mamie. Have you seen her flinch?" Mamie's eyes filled with tears. "I have. It breaks my heart. But Adelaide says it's because we're anxious. She says babies pick up on our stress. With the indictment coming down, with the police watching the building, maybe she feels it, Ellsworth." Bumpy stood up, restless energy coursing through him. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. He hated that answer. He hated the idea that his life, his sins, were bleeding into his daughter's innocence. It was his worst fear, the nightmare that kept him awake. But was it true? He thought about the wet hair. He thought about the look in Adelaide's eyes when he had caught her off guard, that flash of something primal and ugly. "Maybe," Bumpy said, turning back to his wife. "Or maybe it's something else." The decision was made on Thursday. Bumpy had come home at 2 p.m., unexpected. He let himself in quietly, the lock clicking softly. The apartment was quiet. Mamie was out at a charity luncheon. The cook was in the kitchen, moving softly, keeping the place running the way it always ran, like a machine that didn't ask questions. It was just Adelaide and Elise in the back rooms. Bumpy took off his shoes. He walked down the hallway in his socks, moving with the silent grace of a predator. His senses dialed to high alert. He reached the nursery door. It was closed. From inside, he heard a voice. It wasn't the singing voice Adelaide used in front of Mamie. It was low, hissing, venomous. Wicked thing. You are a wicked, dirty thing. Look at you, crying again. We have to wash it out. We have to wash the devil out. Bumpy's blood ran cold. Wash the devil out? He heard the creak of the floorboards. Then, a sharp splashing sound. And then, that terrible, choking gasp he had heard before. The sound of air struggling to find a pathway. Bumpy reached for the doorknob. His hand hovered there, trembling with rage. If he went in now, and she was just washing the baby's face, he would look like a paranoid fool. He would look like the violent gangster everyone said he was, terrorizing the help. If there were no marks on the baby, and Dr. Williams said there were no marks, Adelaide would claim he was crazy. She would tell the agency. She would tell Mamie he was losing his grip. He needed to be sure. He needed to know exactly what was happening in that room. He didn't just need a suspicion. He needed a weapon. He backed away from the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He retreated to his study. He picked up the phone. "Get me Whispers," Bumpy said into the receiver. "Tell him to bring his tool bag, and tell him to bring the German kit." Whispers arrived an hour later, entering through the service elevator. He was a small, wiry man who could fix a slot machine or crack a safe with equal dexterity, a ghost in the machine of the underworld. He looked nervous. Being in Bumpy's home, near his family, was a level of intimacy that made most associates uncomfortable. "Boss," Whispers said, setting his bag on the desk in the study. "You said you needed eyes?" "In the nursery," Bumpy said. His voice was flat, dead, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside him. "I think the nanny is hurting her. But she leaves no marks. The doctor says she's clean." Whispers' face darkened. In the underworld, there was a hierarchy of sin. You could kill a man over a debt. You could burn down a building. But hurting a child? That was a capital offense. A line that was never crossed. "What do you need?" Whispers asked. "I need to see what happens when the door is closed," Bumpy said. "And I need to hear it. But she can't know. She's sharp. If she sees a wire, if she hears a click, she'll stop. And I need to catch her in the act." Whispers nodded. He opened his bag. He pulled out a bulky, strange-looking device. It looked like a camera lens, but it was stripped of its casing, raw metal and glass. "This is new," Whispers said. "War surplus. Reconnaissance lens. I modified it. Silent shutter. It's not a movie camera. The motor would give us away. But I can set it to a timer. It'll snap a photo every 5 seconds for 10 minutes. Fast film, so it'll catch what it can in low light." "Where do we hide it?" Bumpy asked. "The radio," Whispers said. "I saw a big console radio in the corner of the nursery. Does it work?" "Yes." "Perfect. I can mount the lens behind the speaker cloth. The mesh hides the glass, but the lens can see through the weave." "And the sound?" "I'll run a wire," Whispers said. "I'll drill a pinhole through the baseboard, right through the wall into this study. I'll hook it up to a headset. You can sit here and listen live. If you hear something you don't like, you go in." "Do it," Bumpy said. She's out with the baby for another hour. Be fast." They went to work. Bumpy stood watch in the hallway while Whispers performed surgery on the antique radio. He moved with the precision of a bomb diffuser, his hands steady. He removed the tubes, mounted the camera mechanism inside the wooden casing, and aligned the lens with a dark patch in the fabric mesh. He ran a hair-thin copper wire along the floor, tucking it under the carpet edge, feeding it through a tiny hole he bored into the study wall. By 3:30 p.m., the trap was set. The radio looked exactly as it had before, but inside, it was a mechanical witness. "The timer is manual," Whispers instructed, showing Bumpy a small switch he had rigged on the side of the radio cabinet near the floor. "It's hidden. Before you leave the room, you just flick this with your foot. It gives you 10 minutes of shooting." "And the audio?" "Live," Whispers said, handing Bumpy a pair of heavy, military-grade headphones in the study. "As long as the amp is on, you'll hear a pin drop." "Go," Bumpy said. "Take the service elevator. I don't want you here when she gets back." Whispers packed up. He paused at the door. "Bumpy, if you catch her doing something, go," Bumpy repeated. Whispers left. Bumpy sat in his study. The headphones were on the desk. The wire snaked out of the wall like a fuse. He stared at it. He felt like a spider waiting in the center of a web, but he also felt a deep, nauseating dread. He was praying that he was wrong. He was praying that the camera would capture nothing but a stern woman singing lullabies. He was praying that he was just a paranoid father. But Bumpy Johnson rarely prayed for things he believed would happen. At 4 p.m., the front door opened. He heard the wheels of the pram. He heard Adelaide's heavy, confident footsteps. He heard the cooing of Elise, followed by a whimper as she was lifted out of the stroller. Bumpy waited in the study. He listened through the thin walls. "Home again," Adelaide announced. "And now it is time for our nap. And there will be no fussing today, little one. Do you hear me? No fussing." Bumpy put the headphones on. The sound was tinny but crystal clear. He could hear the rustle of the crib sheets. He could hear Adelaide's breathing, heavy, rhythmic. "We are going to be good," Adelaide said. Her voice was different through the headphones. Without the visual of her polished uniform, the tone was starker, cold. There was no warmth in it. It sounded like a warden talking to an inmate. Bumpy heard footsteps leaving the nursery. Adelaide went to the kitchen. He heard water run. Bumpy's heart hammered against his ribs. "Water," she came back. Bumpy heard the door click shut. Then the crying started. It began instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Elise knew. She knew what the closed door meant. She started to scream, a terrified, breathless sound. "Stop it," Adelaide snapped. "Stop that noise." The crying escalated. It was the sound of pure panic. "You are a wicked girl," Adelaide hissed. Bumpy pressed the headphones tighter to his ears, his knuckles white. "A wicked, noisy girl. You want to scream? You want to make noise?" Bumpy heard the splash. "We have to clean you," Adelaide whispered. "We have to wash the noise away." Bumpy heard a wet, slapping sound. A wet cloth hitting skin? Or water being poured? Then, the sound that stopped Bumpy's heart. A gurgling, a choking, spluttering sound. The sound of a baby trying to breathe through liquid. The crying cut off abruptly, replaced by the desperate, wet gasps of drowning. Bumpy ripped the headphones off his head. He stood up so fast, his chair flew backward and smashed into the bookshelf. The world turned red. He didn't think. He didn't plan. The strategy of the mob boss evaporated. The patience of the chess player vanished. There was only the father. He sprinted out of the study. He tore down the hallway, his feet skidding on the rugs. He reached the nursery door. He didn't turn the handle. He raised his leg and kicked it. Crash! The door splintered and flew open, slamming against the wall with a violence that shook the room. The scene that greeted him was a tableau of horror. The room was dim, the curtains drawn. Miss Adelaide was kneeling by the crib. In her hand, she held a large porcelain pitcher. She wasn't giving the baby a bath. She wasn't washing her face. Elise was lying on her back, strapped down by the tight swaddling of her blanket. Adelaide had a wet cloth over the baby's face, covering her nose and mouth, and she was pouring water from the pitcher onto the cloth. It was the water cure. It was drowning without bruises, terror without fingerprints. A method designed to simulate death while leaving the skin clean. Adelaide jerked back at the sound of the door. She dropped the pitcher. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of china and water spraying across the room. She snatched the cloth off Elise's face. Elise sucked in a desperate, ragged breath. She coughed, expelling water, and then let out a scream that tore through Bumpy's soul. Bumpy stepped into the room. He was vibrating. A low, animal growl was coming from his chest. Adelaide scrambled backward, tripping over her own skirts. She fell against the rocking chair. Her face was a mask of shock.
"Mr. Johnson," she shrieked. She was overheating. I was cooling her fever."
Bumpy didn't speak. He walked to the crib. He scooped Elise up. She was soaking wet. Her hair was plastered to her skull. Her face was red and terrifyingly pale around the lips. She clung to him, her tiny fingers digging into his shirt, shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. Bumpy held her tight. He shielded her face in his neck. Then he turned to look at the woman. "Cooling her fever?" Bumpy whispered. His voice was unrecognizable. It was the voice of death.
"Yes, it's a method," Adelaide stammered, backing into the corner. "A European method. For the Constitution."
"You were drowning her," Bumpy said. He took a step toward her. "You put a rag over her face, and you poured water down her throat." "No, never. I would never." Bumpy pointed to the radio in the corner. "Look at the radio, Adelaide." Adelaide looked. She saw nothing but the wooden cabinet. "Inside that radio," Bumpy said, "is a camera and a timer. And inside that wall is a microphone." Adelaide's eyes went wide. The blood drained from her face, leaving her gray. "I heard you," Bumpy said. "I heard you call her wicked. I heard you say you were going to wash the noise away. And the camera? It just took over 100 pictures of you pouring that water." Adelaide slumped. The lie collapsed. The authority vanished. She was just a sadistic woman cornered by a monster. "She cries so much," Adelaide whispered, her voice trembling. "She never stops. It hurts my ears. It's the only way to make her stop. The water scares her. It makes her quiet." "It makes her quiet," Bumpy repeated. He looked at the woman. He looked at her hands. He thought about the weeks his daughter had suffered, the fear he had seen in Elise's eyes every time this woman entered the room. He wanted to kill her. The urge was overwhelming. He wanted to put his thumbs in her eyes. He wanted to throw her out the window and watch her hit the pavement 6 stories down. He wanted to paint the walls with her, but he was holding Elise. And Elise was terrified. If he turned violent now, if he exploded into the violence he was capable of, he would traumatize his daughter forever. He would become the thing Adelaide was, a source of fear. He needed to get Elise out of the room, and he needed to figure out how to destroy this woman without destroying himself. "Get up," Bumpy said. Adelaide stayed on the floor, sobbing.
"Please, Mr. Johnson, I'll leave. I'll go back to England. You'll never see me again."
"Get up," Bumpy roared. Adelaide scrambled to her feet, shaking. "You stay in this room," Bumpy said. "You don't move. If you open that door, if you touch that window, I will come back in here, and I will forget that I am a civilized man." He backed out of the room, clutching Elise. He pulled the door shut. He locked it from the outside with the skeleton key he kept in his pocket. He stood in the hallway, breathing hard. Elise was sobbing into his neck. "It's okay," Bumpy whispered, kissing her wet head. "It's okay. Daddy's here. The bad lady is trapped." But now, he had a problem. He had a prisoner in his nursery. He had evidence of a crime, but he was Bumpy Johnson. He was the most notorious gangster in New York. If he called the police, they wouldn't just arrest the nanny. They would swarm his house. They would investigate him. They would find the guns in the safe. They would find the cash. And they would use this, a baby injured in his care, to say he was unfit. They would take Elise. He couldn't call the cops, and he couldn't kill her. Not with the baby in the house. Not with the scrutiny he was under. He needed a different kind of justice. He walked to the kitchen. He needed Mamie. Mamie had just walked in the back door, shaking out her umbrella. She looked up, smiling, about to ask how his day was. Then she saw Bumpy. She saw the baby, soaking wet. She saw the look in her husband's eyes, a look she hadn't seen since the gang wars of the 30s. "Ellsworth?" Mamie dropped her umbrella. "What is it? Is she sick?" "No," Bumpy said, his voice cracking. "She's not sick." He walked over to Mamie and handed her the baby. "Take her," Bumpy said. "Dry her off. Hold her tight." "What happened?" Mamie demanded, seeing the water dripping from Elise's clothes. "Why is she wet?" "The nanny," Bumpy said. "Adelaide." "What about her?" Bumpy looked at his wife. He saw the softness in her face. He knew he was about to break her heart. But he also knew he was about to unleash her fury. "She wasn't giving her a bath, Mamie," Bumpy said. "She was drowning her to keep her quiet." Mamie went rigid. She looked at the baby. She looked at the wet hair. She looked at Bumpy. "Where is she?" Mamie whispered. The softness was gone. The sophisticated socialite vanished. In her place was something ancient and terrifying. "She's locked in the nursery," Bumpy said. Mamie turned sharply. The cook was in the doorway now, eyes wide, hands hovering, like she didn't know whether to pray or run. Mamie thrust Elise toward her. "Take Elise to my room," Mamie ordered. "Lock the door, turn on the radio. Don't come out until I come for you." The cook nodded and ran. Mamie turned back to Bumpy. She smoothed her skirt. She took a deep breath. "Unlock the door, Ellsworth," she said. "Mamie," Bumpy started. "We have to be smart." "I am going to be smart," Mamie said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were burning. "You can't touch her. You're Bumpy Johnson. If you touch her, you go to jail. If you touch her, they take everything." She walked past him toward the hallway. "But I'm just a mother," Mamie said, "and nobody tells a mother how to protect her child." Bumpy watched her go. He followed her. He handed her the key. He knew then that Miss Adelaide was about to wish she had faced the gangster, because she was about to face the mother. Mamie Johnson stood before the locked door of the nursery, the brass skeleton key heavy in her hand. The hallway was silent, save for the distant, muffled sound of the radio playing in the bedroom where the cook was guarding Elise. To an outsider, Mamie looked like a statue of elegance, her dress perfectly pressed, her hair immaculate. But Bumpy, standing a few feet behind her in the shadows, saw the truth. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her manicured fingernails dug into her palm, and the slight tremor in her jaw that signaled a rage so profound it transcended anger and entered the realm of the instinctual. She didn't look back at Bumpy. She didn't ask for permission. She simply inserted the key into the lock. Click. Mamie turned the handle and pushed the door open. The nursery was dim, illuminated only by the street lamp casting long prison bar shadows through the blinds. The air was thick with the smell of spilled water and fear. Miss Adelaide was standing in the corner near the window, her hands clasped in front of her chest as if in prayer. When the door opened, she straightened up, attempting to reassemble the shattered fragments of her dignity. She saw Mamie. She saw a woman she had dismissed for weeks as a pampered gangster's wife, a woman she believed was too soft to notice what was happening in her own home. Adelaide smoothed her wet uniform, preparing the lie she had rehearsed in the minutes she had been locked inside. "Mrs. Johnson," Adelaide began, her voice quivering but striving for authority. "Thank goodness. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Mr. Johnson came in and he was in a state. He misconstrued a standard medical procedure." She stopped. Mamie walked into the room. She didn't storm in. She walked with a slow, deliberate cadence, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She stopped 3 feet from the Nanny. She looked at the shattered porcelain pitcher on the floor. She looked at the puddle of water soaking into the expensive rug. She looked at the empty crib where her daughter had been tortured. Then she looked at Adelaide. "A medical procedure," Mamie repeated. Her voice was low, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. "Yes," Adelaide said, gaining a fraction of confidence. "Hydrotherapy. It arrests the nervous system when a child is hysterical. It is used in the best sanatoriums in Europe. I was only trying to help Elise. She was frantic." "You were helping her," Mamie said, taking another step forward. "I was," Adelaide insisted, though she took a step back, hitting the wall. "The child has no discipline. She cries to manipulate you. I was teaching her that screaming yields no reward. I was teaching her control." Mamie smiled. It was a smile that didn't touch her eyes. It was a smile that belonged to a predator looking at a wounded gazelle. "You think I'm stupid, don't you?" Mamie asked softly. "You think because I wear nice clothes and host tea parties that I don't know what cruelty looks like. You think because I let you into my home, I gave you permission to play God with my flesh and blood." "Mrs. Johnson, I am a professional." Mamie moved. It was a blur of motion, faster than Adelaide could track. Crack! The sound of the slap echoed off the walls like a pistol shot. Mamie didn't slap like a lady. She slapped with her entire body weight, pivoting her hips, driving her palm into Adelaide's cheekbone with the force of a falling brick. Adelaide's head snapped to the side. She stumbled, her legs tangling in her skirts, and she crashed to the floor. She let out a cry of shock, clutching her face. A bright red welt was already blooming on her pale skin, and her lip was split, bleeding onto her white collar. "Professional," Mamie hissed, standing over her. "You are a sadist." Bumpy watched from the doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. He didn't move to stop her. He was the silent sentry, the wall that ensured there was no escape. Adelaide looked up, tears streaming from her eyes. The mask of superiority was gone. You struck me. That is assault. I will have you arrested. I will sue you for everything you have." Mamie laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She crouched down, her skirts pooling around her on the wet floor, ignoring the water seeping into the fabric. She grabbed Adelaide's chin, her fingers digging into the flesh, forcing the woman to look her in the eye. "You want to talk about the law?" Mamie whispered. "In this house, Adelaide, we are the law. You think the police are going to help you? You think a jury is going to sympathize with a woman who drowned an 8-month-old baby?" "It wasn't drowning," Adelaide shrieked. Mamie squeezed harder. "My husband has a recording," she said. "He has photographs. We have pictures of you holding a wet rag over my daughter's face. We have audio of you calling her wicked.
Do you know what happens to women who hurt babies in prison, Adelaide? Do you know what the other inmates do to them? Adelaide went still. She looked past Mamie to Bumpy, standing in the shadows. She saw the darkness in his eyes and realized she was trapped in a penthouse with the most dangerous people in Harlem. I didn't mean to, Adelaide sobbed, her defiance crumbling. She just wouldn't stop crying. The noise, it goes through me. It makes my head split. I just wanted quiet. You had a reputation, Mamie corrected, letting go of her chin with a shove. Now you have nothing. Mamie stood up and pulled the blinds shut, sealing the room off from the world. Get up, she ordered. Adelaide scrambled to her feet, shaking. Ellsworth, Mamie said without looking back. Bring the chair. Bumpy picked up the heavy wooden rocking chair, the chair where Adelaide had sat while she tortured their child, and placed it in the center of the room. Sit, Mamie commanded. Adelaide sat, looking small in the chair, her white uniform stained and rumpled. Mamie began to pace before her. For 3 weeks, Mamie said, her voice trembling, I listened to you tell me that I was doing it wrong, that I was too soft, that I was spoiling her. Mamie leaned in close. I looked at my baby flinching, and I let you tell me it was colic. I let you tell me it was my fault. Do you know what that feels like? To trust a wolf with your lamb? I'm sorry, Adelaide wept. Sorry doesn't fix it, Mamie snapped. She turned to Bumpy. The photos. Give them to me. Bumpy handed her the stack of wet prints. Mamie shuffled through them, Adelaide filling the pitcher, pinning Elise's arms, pouring the water. The grainy black and white images were like scenes from a horror movie. She threw them into Adelaide's lap. Look at them, Mamie screamed. Look at them! Adelaide looked down at the cruelty frozen in silver nitrate and wailed, covering her face. I'm sick, she sobbed. I need help. You're exactly yourself, Bumpy said from the shadows, his voice like grinding stones. This is who you are when you think no one is watching. Mamie took a deep breath. She knew they couldn't kill her. A dead white woman in Bumpy Johnson's apartment would bring the entire city down on Harlem, but they couldn't just fire her. If Adelaide walked out, she could spin a story that Bumpy attacked her, and the police might believe the white professional over the gangster. They needed to destroy her credibility forever. Mamie walked to the writing desk, picked up a pen and stationery, and brought them to Adelaide. You're going to write a letter, Mamie said. A confession. You are going to write that you suffer from mental instability, that you have violent urges toward children, that you held a cloth over Elise's face and poured water on it because you wanted her quiet. Adelaide shook her head frantically. I can't write that. If I write that, I'll be ruined. I'll never work again. That's the point, Mamie said. I won't do it, Adelaide whispered. Bumpy stepped out of the shadows. He walked over to the radio cabinet and placed his large hand on it. Adelaide, Bumpy said softly, do you know who I am? I am Bumpy Johnson. People say I bury people in the foundations of buildings. They say I cut out tongues. Bumpy leaned down. Most of those stories are just stories, he whispered. But for you, I might make an exception. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade. Click. The blade snapped out, gleaming in the dim light. He began to clean his fingernails with the tip. My wife is asking you to write a letter, Bumpy said. I suggest you pick up the pen. Adelaide looked at the knife, then at Bumpy's dead eyes. She realized she was in an execution chamber. She picked up the pen, her hand shaking violently, and wrote. She confessed to the abuse, the water, and her own sickness. When she was done, she signed it. Mamie pocketed the letter. Now, she said, here is how this ends. You are going to walk out of here. You are going to go to the police station. And you are going to turn yourself in." Adelaide gasped. "The police? But I confessed. I gave you the letter." "The letter is insurance," Mamie said. "The police? That is for justice." "I can't go to jail," Adelaide sobbed. "Just let me leave the city." Mamie grabbed Adelaide by the hair, yanking her head back. "You don't get to negotiate. You tortured my baby. You don't get to start over in Boston or Chicago and do this to another child." Her voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. "You are going to the 28th precinct, because if you don't turn yourself in by midnight, my husband's rules no longer apply." Mamie picked up a pair of heavy sewing scissors from the side table. The metal glinted. "I will come to your house while you are sleeping," Mamie whispered, "and I will do to you what you did to my daughter. Only, I won't stop when you pass out." Adelaide stared at her and saw the truth. Mamie Johnson had become a killer in her heart to protect her child. "Do you believe me?" Mamie asked. "Yes," Adelaide whispered. "Get up," Mamie said. Adelaide stood, her legs shaking, clutching her purse to her chest. "Go," Bumpy said, stepping aside. Adelaide ran. She fled the nursery, fumbling with the locks on the front door, and stumbled out into the hallway, terrified. Bumpy watched her enter the elevator and lock the door behind her. He turned back to Mamie, who was still standing in the nursery, holding the scissors so tight her knuckles were white. Bumpy gently pried them from her fingers. "Mamie," he said softly. "I told her I would kill her," Mamie whispered, vibrating with adrenaline. "And I meant it, Ellsworth." "I know," Bumpy said, wrapping his arms around her. "You protected the nest." An hour later, the phone rang. It was the desk sergeant at the 28th precinct. Adelaide had walked in, hysterical, bleeding, and confessed. She was in a holding cell, crying about water. Mamie closed her eyes. "Good," she whispered. "Let her rot." The morning after Miss Adelaide turned herself in, the sun rose over Harlem with a deceptive brightness. Bumpy Johnson sat in his study, the headphones from the surveillance rig still on his desk, when the phone rang at 9 a.m. It was Sergeant O'Malley. His voice was tight, hushed. "Mr. Johnson," O'Malley whispered, "we got a situation. A lawyer just walked in. Name is Arthur Sterling. High-priced, silver hair, three-piece suit. He represents the agency that placed her." Bumpy felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. What is he doing? "He's making noise," O'Malley said. "He's claiming the confession was coerced. He saw the bruise on her face, the slap your wife gave her. He's spinning a story. He says you and Mamie kidnapped her, held her hostage, and forced her to write that letter at knife point." Bumpy closed his eyes. It was the nightmare scenario. A white woman claiming a black gangster brutalized her. In 1952, that was a lynching waiting to happen. "And Adelaide?" Bumpy asked. "She's scared, but Sterling is in her ear," O'Malley said. "He's telling her if she recants, he can get her out by noon. He's threatening a federal investigation into the precinct if we don't release her." "Stall him," Bumpy said. "Give me an hour." "Bumpy, you can't come down here," O'Malley warned. "If you walk into the station, Sterling will point at you and say, 'There's the monster.'" "I'm not coming to the station," Bumpy said. "Just tell Mr. Sterling that if he wants to play games, he should check his own closet first." Bumpy hung up. The rage simmered low and hot in his gut. They were trying to flip the board, trying to turn the monster into the martyr. He walked to the safe hidden behind the painting, opened it, and took out the stack of photographs Whispers had developed. The undeniable proof of Adelaide's cruelty. Then he took out something else. A thin folder with a name typed on the front in neat, bureaucratic letters. Arthur Sterling. Bumpy had been in this city too long not to understand how men like Sterling made their money. Lawyers, politicians, cops,
men with clean cuffs and dirty appetites. Over the years, Bumpy had learned to keep files the way other men kept guns. He put the baby photos in a manila envelope, and he slipped the Sterling folder under his arm. Then he called his driver. "Get the car," Bumpy said, "and find out where Arthur Sterling eats lunch." Arthur Sterling was a man who believed that money bought innocence and connections bought silence. He sat in a booth at Delmonico's, a high-end steakhouse in Midtown, nursing a martini and drafting the press release in his head. Nanny terrorized by Harlem mobster. He felt victorious. A shadow fell over his table. Sterling looked up, annoyed. "I'm expecting someone. The words died in his throat. Standing there, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, holding a fedora and cane, was Bumpy Johnson. The restaurant went quiet. Bumpy didn't belong here. This was a white establishment of old money, but Bumpy looked like he owned the building. "Mr. Sterling," Bumpy said softly, "do you mind if I join you?" Sterling stiffened. "I have nothing to say to you," he hissed. "You are a criminal. My client has accused you of kidnapping and assault. If you don't leave, I will have you arrested right here." Bumpy smiled, a cold, razor-thin smile. "You could do that," he said, sitting down uninvited. "But then you wouldn't see what's in the envelope." He placed the manila envelope on the white tablecloth. Sterling laughed nervously. "A bribe? I bill $500 an hour. Your dirty street money doesn't interest me." "It's not money," Bumpy said. He signaled the terrified waiter. "I'll have an iced tea, and bring Mr. Sterling another martini. He's going to need it." Bumpy turned back to the lawyer. "Open the envelope, Arthur." Sterling hesitated, seeing the certainty in Bumpy's eyes. He opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of 8x10 glossy photographs. He looked at the first one, Adelaide standing over the crib, snarling, pouring water. He looked at the second one, the water hitting the baby's face, the cloth covering her nose and mouth, Elise's tiny hands flailing in terror. He looked at the third one, Adelaide pinning the baby down. Sterling's face went gray. He dropped the photos, a mosaic of torture amidst the fine china. "My God," he whispered. "That," Bumpy said, pointing at the photos, "is your client. That is the victim you are telling the police I kidnapped." Sterling stared at the images. He was amoral, but looking at a woman drowning a baby turned his stomach. "She said she was giving the child a bath," Sterling stammered. "She said you misunderstood." "Does that look like a bath to you, Arthur?" Bumpy asked. "That is torture." He leaned forward. "You are going to go back to the precinct, withdraw your motion, and advise your client to plead guilty." Sterling swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" he asked, trying to regain his footing. "These photos, you took them illegally. They're inadmissible in court. Fruit of the poisonous tree." Bumpy laughed, a dark, chilling sound. "You think we're in a courtroom, Arthur? You think this is about the rules of evidence?" Bumpy pulled out a second envelope, smaller, thinner, already waiting. "You worry about admissibility," Bumpy said. "I worry about public opinion." He slid the second envelope across the table. Sterling opened it. Inside were grainy black and white photos of Arthur Sterling in a compromising position with a young woman who was definitely not Mrs. Sterling. Sterling went white, his hands shaking. "You're blackmailing me," he whispered. "I'm negotiating," Bumpy corrected. "You can defend the monster and try to get her off on a technicality. And if you do, these photos go to your wife, the bar association, and the newspapers." Bumpy took a sip of his iced tea. "Or you can do the right thing. You can walk away. You can let justice happen." Sterling looked at the photos of the baby. He looked at the photos of himself. He looked at Bumpy Johnson, the man who had outmaneuvered him without raising his voice. He realized
He had been checkmated. Sterling put the photos of himself back in his pocket and pushed the baby photos toward Bumpy.
"She lied to me," Sterling said, his voice hollow. "I'm withdrawing from the case. I'll tell the captain I have a conflict of interest. She's on her own."
"Good choice, Arthur," Bumpy said.
"Enjoy your lunch."
Sterling fled the restaurant.
Back at the 28th precinct, Adelaide waited for her savior, only to see Sergeant O'Malley approach with handcuffs instead of a release form.
"Where is my lawyer?" Adelaide asked. "Mr. Sterling called," O'Malley said grimly. "He's withdrawn from your case, and the DA has seen the evidence. You're being transferred to the Tombs, then Rikers Island."
"Transferred?" Adelaide shrieked.
"Let me tell you something," O'Malley said. "The women inside, they don't take kindly to baby beaters. You better learn to pray." Adelaide began to scream, realizing she was going to a place where monsters were eaten by bigger monsters.
6 months later, spring had returned to Harlem.
Bumpy Johnson sat on his balcony reading the Amsterdam news. Adelaide Miller had pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Mamie walked out onto the balcony holding Elise. The baby was walking now, laughing on chubby legs. The fear was gone. The trust had returned after months of gentle care. Mamie sat next to Bumpy and looked at the headline. 10 years, Mamie said softly. "It's enough?" "She lost her life," Bumpy said. "She is a ghost now." Bumpy took Elise's hand. She looked at him with bright, clear eyes and grinned. "Dada," she said. Bumpy's heart melted. He picked her up and sat her on his lap. "We did good," he said. "We did what we had to do," Mamie corrected. "But Ellsworth, we need a cleaning lady. I can't keep up with this apartment by myself." Bumpy laughed. "A cleaning lady, okay. But," Mamie added seriously, "family only. Nobody else touches her." "Family only," Bumpy agreed. They sat in the sunlight, the king and queen of Harlem, holding their princess tight. Bumpy kissed the top of Elisa's head, smelling the baby shampoo and sunshine. He had faced a monster in his own home and banished it. "You're safe," Bumpy whispered to her. "As long as I'm breathing, you're safe." And for the first time in a long time, Bumpy Johnson believed it.
Thanks for listening, folks. If you liked that video and want more, be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any Bumpy Johnson stories.